The Hasidic do, right?
What do you say?
Who does this? The Chavrusa. The Hasidic enterprise,
Which fellow?
the people who do this, the Sifta or Chavrusa.
Oh, yeah, I think so. From Muncie or someplace, I don't know where. So we're studying the Tosas here at the beginning of this parak, which is called Katan Iatatzorach Lachsa. And the question is whether a Katan has Yarshim, is a Katan capable of being molid or not being molid, but certainly the premise of the Gemara is that a Katan has possessions, he owns Mama. So Tosas asks, Lahai Katan Mamona. How does a Katan acquire ownership? Ha'amrina b'perek Misha Meis. The Gemara establishes at the end of Bava Basra, Ein Zchiyah leKatan. You have it?
Tosfot Samachin with that Katan.
Katan Yatatzorach Lachsa. Yeah.
Second Tosfot, I think.
So the question that Tosfos is facing is, how does a Katan acquire ownership? And Ein Zchiyah leKatan means a Katan doesn't have a yad to be zocha on his own. Tosfos raises a possibility, Kishazichu lo al yidei acher. Perhaps somebody was zocha on his behalf, and we apply the principle of zocha liyodem shalom b'fanav. What?
Even for a cut.
So Tosfos says, this we can't say, right? Ha'ikal amad yomer perek misha meis, zachin legadol, the ain't zachin lekatan. Tosfos is going to explain why in just a minute. V'afilu amad yomer zachin lekatan, hainu midrabanan v'lo midaraisa. How does Tosfos know? Thank you so much. That zechia lekatan is only derabbanan, it can't be doraisa. Zechia mitorah shlichus. How do I know that zechia operates midin shlichus? Kinemuchach beperakamed above mitzir. The Amrin chotza mishum yadis rabbi v'lo gara mishlichus. Ukatan labra shlichusu. So let's take a break here and just summarize. Tosfos is putting together a lot of different sugyas. First of all, he's saying that although ein zchiyah lekatan, there is a possibility that even if the Katan himself could not be Zoch in Mammon, maybe somebody could be Zoch on his behalf. And then we apply the principle of Zochin. The Tosfos says, no. I'll prove to you that Zochin is based on Shlichus. Anyone who's included in Shlichus is included in Zochin. And a Katan is not included in Shlichus. And the Gemara there says, for example, that Chatzer cannot be Kona on behalf of a Katan because Chatzer is mitam Shlichus. The Chatzer is like a Shliach. And a Katan doesn't have Shlichus. He's not included in the Parsha of Shlichus. The Tosfos suggests, Umiu, perhaps we can find a solution in a Gemara in Gittin. On Daf Samach Daled Amud Beis with Perkis Kabel, and there the Gemara differentiates between different levels of a Katan, how mature he is, and how much das he has. The first level is called Srar V'Zarko, Egos V'Notlo. He understands the difference between something that's valueless, which he throws out, as opposed to something that has value and he takes it for himself. And at that level, the Gemara says, and this is a statement here of Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rabbi Asi, Zocha li'atzmo v'ein zocha la'acherim. At this point, he can be zocha on his own behalf, according to Rabbi Asi. Now he gets to a higher level of maturity. You give him something of value, and he knows to return it to you after an hour. And in that case, Rabbi Asi upgrades his status, and zocha bein liatzmo bein la'acherim. So now Tosfos has an opening here, as a petach, to solve his problem. There could be that a Katan can be Zoche. It can even be Zoche Lacherim according to Rabbi Yassi. You might argue, well, that's only D'Rabbanan. No, says Tos. Mashma Dahainu Midoraisa. The Tos has a proof that halacha is D'Oraisa. Let's just point out here that although Tosfos now is quoting the Shita Rabbi Yassi, however, not all the Amoraim agree with him. Shmuel actually disagrees. And he holds that no matter what level the Katan is reached, even if he's more mature and he returns an object of that was given to him back to its rightful owner, nevertheless, he cannot be Zochel Acherim. But it seems that everybody, both Rabbi Yassi and Shmuel, agree that once he reaches that higher level, he can be Zocher Li'atzmo. And that seems to be Doraisa, as Tosfos is going to prove. So in the Havamin of Tosfos says, I don't understand, how could a Katan possibly be Zocher Li'atzmo? You need what's called Das Kone, and a Katan is a Lav Bar Das. So he doesn't have Das Kone to be Kone something. Tosfos suggests that maybe we can introduce here Zechia, and maybe in the case of Zechia, if somebody is Zoch on his behalf, then even if he doesn't have Das Kone, but nevertheless Zechia could operate, and we'll see soon that Zechia will set up a Das Acheres Makne, we'll see what that means. But Tosfos says you can't have Zoch Li'odim L'Katan because Zechia is predicated on Shlichus, and a Katan is not about Shlichus. Now Tosfos says, but we do have a Man D'Yomar in Masechet Gittin who maintains that a Katan has a Zechia. Not only that Rabbi Yassi holds he has a Zechia Li'atzmo and even Lacherim. Tosfos says, and even if you'll quote the opposing view of Shmuel, Shmuel only argues about whether he could be Zochel Lacherim. But even Shmuel agrees that if he reaches that level of maturity, that when you give him something, he returns it, he can be Zochel Li'atzmo. And that Tosfos says is Doraisa. But wait a second, if a Katan could be Zocher for himself, let's say a Katan finds a Mitzia on the street, and he wants to be Zocher in the Mitzia for himself. So the Gemara says, actually it's a Mishnah on Nizakin, you'll see it a few lines down in Tosfos, that Mitzias Cheresh Shotu Katan Yesh B'hem Mishum Gezel Mipnei Darkei Shalom. The Rabbanan made a takana in order to keep the peace. We're not going to take away a mitzvah from a katan. He's zoche in the mitzvah. Aval midoraisa lo. Obviously, if it's only mishum darkei shalom, it's not doraisa. So at this point, Tosfos is in a bind. He has a sugya in Gittin in which it seems that both Rabbi Yassi and Shmuel agree, kuliyamalo pligi, that a katan could be Zochel Li'atzmo if he reaches that age of maturity. And yet, the Mishnah actually says that a katan could be Zochel Mitzia only midrabanan mishum darkei shalom. We just finished proving from the Gemara in Parakam his Kabel that a katan could be Zochel midoraisa. According to Ravasi, ben liatzmo, ben lacherim. According to Shmuel, at least liatzmo. So if a katan can be zoch liatzmo and he picks up this mitzvah on a doraisa level, he should acquire ownership. Why does the Mishnah say that they had to institute a new derabanan of darkei shalom in order to validate the kinyan that a katan makes on a lost object? So Tosfos has a brilliant reconciliation. He says, Das Acheres Machnos Sunshine. It all depends if someone else is being Zocha on his behalf. So when it says in the Gemara in Parakam his Kabel that both according to Rav Asi and according to Rav Shmuel, a katan could be Zocha Doraisa, that's because somebody else is being Zocha on his behalf. Somebody is giving him matana, or somebody is selling something. So there's a das makne.
There's hefker.
Oh, but if it's a case of mitzia, there's no das acheres makne, and therefore the katan has no zechia because he needs a das kone, and he's a labar das, so he cannot acquire ownership. Only after the Rabbana made a takana mishum darkei shalom, now he could be zochen mitzia. But if not for the darkei shalom takana, he could not be zochen mitzia because we're lacking what? Das acheres makna. There's no seller, there's no makna, there's no one who's giving him a gift. He's all on his own.
And it has to be a gift. Can a guy give a Katan?
Who?
The das Machne can be anyone, or is it only someone? Because if it's Mitzvah,
It has to be a gadol.
But
Why?
a gadol, a Jewish gadol.
Oh, that I don't know. I'm not sure about that.
If he says shlichus,
No, again, we're not dealing with
yeah,
shlichus. We dropped the ball on shlichus right now. What we're talking is that someone is giving and transferring ownership to the katan, directly to the katan, not through a shliach. And that person has what's called a das mak. The katan doesn't have a das kona because he's a labar das. But it doesn't matter. Tosfos says on a deraisa level, das acheres makna is enough to replace the lack, the deficiency or the chisaron of what? Of das kona. You don't need das kona. You need das acheres mak.
Do we see that? Do we see that in other examples that the kinyan of someone taking something from Hefker versus the kinyan of someone who's giving him something as a gift or selling him something? There's a different kinyan there? Because that's basically what Tosfos is getting at.
I think this is the chiddush of Tosfos, because Tosfos says otherwise, how do we reconcile this contradiction? We're saying that a cotton could be zocha, and that's no rice, and then we're saying a cotton can only be zocha because of darkei shalom, which is only Rabbanan. So Tosfos says it all depends. If the cotton is being zoch because somebody is being makna to him, either through matana or through machira, then it's doraisa. The cotton could be zocher through the principle, through the mechanism of das acheres makna. If, on the other hand, the cotton has no das acheres, it's purely das kona, he's on his own because he's being zocher a mitzia, then without das acheres makna, what are you left with? You left with das kona. And the cotton is a lot more das, so you have no das here whatsoever. Neither das makna nor das kona. You're left with zilch. And therefore, the Rabbanan had to institute a new enterprise, which is called Mitzias Kot Mishum Darkei Shalom.
But it's that that's kind of a certain age.
Yes, correct. Yeah, Tosfos is going to work out those details later. But again, at some point, we could say that he has das, but it's not enough das to create a das kona because the kona is a labar das. But if there's das acheres makna, then the makna could transfer ownership to the katan through das acheres mak. Okay.
Why the darkei shalom? What can go wrong?
No, then we don't want to have fights. You know, the cotton is going to start calling his father in, and they're going to start bludgeoning each other and beating each other up. If the cotton picked up the mitzvah, laws up it, leave it alone. Let him take it home. Okay, that's darkei shalom.
That's what it is.
So again, let's just summarize what we have here. Tosfos in his kasha was asking, how do we have a situation where a cotton is kona something, and he has ownership? In order to own something, you need das makna, you need das kona, and the cotton is a labar das. He's not capable of das kona. And Tosfos answers that there's something called das acheres makna, and a cotton could be zocha on a deraisa level through das acheres makna, with the exception of a mitzia, because in the case of mitzia, there's no das acheres makna, and there's only das kona, and the katan, is a labar das, and therefore the Rabbanan came to the rescue, and in the case of mitzia, they established mishum darkei shalom that we validate the kinyan of a katan. Comes along the shach, and I think you have it in your phone if you need it. But the shach is very, very long and extensive. I don't know whether I should encourage you to go through the shach or not. The shach has a Yushalmi in the fourth parak of Masros, and the Yushalmi assumes that a katan could be zocheh d'oraisa even in a case of mitzia, which means that even in the absence of das acheres makna, the katan could make a kinyan
Even without darkei shalom.
even without darkei shalom on a d'oraisa level. No, so why does the Mishnah say that darkei shalom is only takana d'Rabbanan? Says the Yushalmi, that's a case of a katan who hasn't reached a maturity level, But if he had reached the maturity level, then he could be Zoche Midoraisa, and that's okay, even without Das Acheres Makna. So the question that the Shach asks is, wait a minute, if there's no Das Acheres Makna, so all you have is Das Kona. Let's say it's a Mitzvah. What are you left with? There's no Makna, there's no Das Makna. You're left with only Das Kona. Well, the Katan is a La Bar Das.
We also going to be Yishalmi. I mean,
How does Yishalmi work? In other words, we don't understand the methodology, the mechanism by which Yishalmi could establish that a Katan who's a La Bar Das is capable of acquiring ownership even without a Das Makna, when all you have is Das Kona. And the Das Kona in this case is that of a Katan. A Katan is a La Bar Das, so you don't even have Das Kona. And as Tosas pointed out, Mimanavshah, he can't be Zoch in a Mitzvah. You don't have Das Makna, and you don't have Das Kona. So what are you left with? You're left with zero. So I don't know if any of you remember what we discussed last week, but just to give you a little gist of what's going on here, this Yushalmi, the Yushalmi is of the opinion that to be kona something, you don't need das. If you needed das, then how could it possibly be that a katan who's a La Bar Das could be kona something? So what do you need? What? Excellent, kavanah. All you need is kavanah. And a katan, once he reaches a certain level of maturity, he can have kavanah. So just to reiterate what we discussed last week, we had two rayos from Shas that a katan could have kavanah. One is a Mishnah in Gittin, and the other is a Rambam in Hilchas Paraduma. The Mishnah in Gittin establishes that a kol ksherim l'ksivas haget, get has to be written lishma, even a cherishot b'katan. So the Gemara immediately asks over there on the Mishnah Chav Beis in Gittin, how could it be a katan is a La Bar Das? Cherishot b'katan la b'nei deyaninu. So how can you imagine that he writes a get lishma? So the Gemara answers, "Begadol omed al gab." Now Rashi's shita in Gadol omed al gabav, and pretty much all the Rishonim except for the Rashba, and even the Rashba is only quoting his Rebbe, but he doesn't necessarily buy onto his Rebbe. But all the Rishonim claim that the Katan is the one who generates the lishma in the get through his ksiva. So the Gadol omed al gabav is not the source, if you will. It's not the origin of the lishma. The lishma doesn't come from the gadol. The gadol is there to supervise the katan. In fact, the Gemara asks, maybe a guy could do it. So the Gemara answers that a guy is a daita denafshe kavan, meaning a guy doesn't have kavanah to write a get lishma. But a katan has kavanah to write a get lishma. And we're going to make a provision that there's a gadol omed al gabav to make sure and guarantee and supervise that he has kavanah lishma. But this is a doraisa Allah. Now you might ask the following question. I mean, the Gemara and the Havamina thought that in order to create lishma and get, you need a bardas. So the Gemara immediately objects a katan is la bardas. And the Gemara answers, gadol omed al gabav. The Gemara is now revolutionizing the whole status of a katan and establishing that a katan has kavanah, although he doesn't have das, he has kavanah.
It's only by a get or that Gadol omed al gabav.
So far, we know it in two places. Number one, with regard to ksivas get lishma, to generate a lishma, chalos tin lishma the get. And number two, in a case where a katan is making a kinyan to be zoche in, let's say, a mitzvah in the case of Yushalmi, which the Yushalmi validates midoraisa. And why? Where's the das kona? And the answer is he doesn't have das kona. He's a La Bar Das. But the katan is capable of kavana, and as long as he has kavana for Maisa Kinyan, and he understands very well what it means to have ownership, because he's already reached that level of returning something that you give him. So through that kavana, he can be kona something. Tosfos on the other hand says, no, to be kona something, you need das. And a katan is a La Bar Das, so there's no das kona, and in the case of mitzvah, there's no das makna. Hence, that kinyan could only be an institution of the Rabbanim. But the Yerushalmi is of the opinion, name. We don't need das and a bar das to acquire a kinyan. And as the Gemara answers in the case of get, we don't need a bar das to generate lishma in the get. Even the ksiv of a katan is sufficient because he has kavana. Now, this distinction between kavana and das, where does it come from? So I'll tell you where I know it from. I know it from Reb Chaim. Reb Chaim wants to know, why is it that in Cheresh Shotav Katan, in Chalitza, the Gemara analyzes this from the perspective of Kriya. In Yibum and Chalitza, I should say in Chalitza, there are two dimensions. There's the Maisa Chalitza, and then there's the Kriya Saparsha. And even though the Kriya is not Ma'aki, but we need a Bar Kriya. So let's say, for example, a Cheresh, again, I'm not going into the question who is a Cheresh, but let's say he's Eno Shomea, V'eno Medaber, he's totally mute, he cannot speak and he cannot recite the Parsha. So Reb Chaim wants to know, why does the Gemara have to go around the back over here and somersaults in the air to explain why a Cheresh is not capable of Chalitza because he's not a Bar Kriya? Forget about all that. He's not a Bar Das. Not only that, the Grach, Reb Chaim, has proofs to establish that although in Gittin v'Kiddushin you need what's called Eidus L'Kiyum Adovar, in Chalitza you don't need Eidus L'Kiyum Adovar.
What does that mean?
Oh, what does that mean? In Gittin v'Kiddushin, if a man gives Kiddush to a woman, and there are no Eidim there, but there are two Eidim standing outside the building, and they look through the window, that's called Eidus L'Bir Hadover. Those Eidim can only establish and clarify what went on. But that's not enough for Gittin v'Kiddushin. The Gemara says you can't do such a thing. If the Eidim are hidden from sight, this is why, I don't know if you've ever seen at a chasana where the Masechet Kiddushin will say to the chasan, be miyached the Eidim, because we need Eidus L'Kiyum Adover. The Eidus really creates the Kiddushin, creates the Gerushin, and has to be appointed as such by the Baal. So Reb Chaim wants to know, what about Chalitza? And he has proofs that in Chalitza, all you need is two Eidim L'Bir Adov. They happen to see the Chalitza. Nobody invited them. Nobody knew they were there. Why is that different than Gittin Kiddushin? So here's where Reb Chaim has his major breakthrough. I'll just read 2 or 3 lines in Reb Chaim. It's a very long Reb Chaim. He says the following. Begin v'Kiddushin tzarich das bailim. Let's emphasize the word das. Okay, so the das means that the Makadesh creates the chalos. That's das. He's called Bailu, says Reb Chaim. He has Bailus, and therefore he controls the Ishus and the chalos Ishus, and he has das. His das will create that chalos. Ve'ikar gittin v'kiddushin v'gerushin, right? Ikar kiddushin v'gerushin nasal yidei Bailin. So the chalos ishus or the hafkas ishus is a result of the bailin. Al kein bein and daiton. We need that das. Mashe enkin bechalitza uksivas get lishma ain't by zedin das bailin. Kavana hu to be eaten al etzem maisa chalitza. You need kavana for the maisa chalitza. You need kavana for the ksiva lishma, and the chalos is ba mimela. Interesting, mimela. You know, the Torah generates the chalos. You have to just do the ma'isa, and you have to do the ma'isa with kavana, and that's how Reb Chaim explains when there's no din of das bailim. Therefore, you don't need Eidus L'Kiyum Adover, and all you need is Eidus L'Bir Adover, and therefore, basically, Cheresh Shotav Katan should be kosher for chalitza. If not for the problem of whether they're Bar Kriya or they're not Bar Kriya, but that's technicality. But the problem that a Cheresh Shotav Katan is lav Bar Das, according to Reb Chaim, does not arise with regard to Chalitza or Ksiva Lishma, because Reb Chaim says that that's not a loch of Das, Rak Kavana Hu de Be'ina. And we're taking this Reb Chaim now, and we're applying it to the Yerushalmi of the Shach. The Yerushalmi is now saying that for Kinyanim, All you need is kavana. You don't need das. And then Afkamina is going to be a katan. A katan is capable of effectuating a kinyan, even in the case of what, Rabbosai? A mitzvah where there's no das makne, it's only das kona, but we don't need das. All we need is kavana. And if the katan has reached a certain level of maturation, then he has kavana al pidin. Torah recognizes kavana.
Just savage. Why would a Karashad B'Kalvan be need Chalitza B'Chlal? Can I do?
Why would they be?
Why would I have to do Chalitza? Can I do Yibami?
Why are they in the
Why
parsha?
would I have Parsha B'Chlal?
Well, if he's a ben test and he's a bar hopi of beer, then maybe his beer would be a beer siyum.
Oh, okay.
I mean, for that you have to know half of Masechet Imamos.
Yeah, okay. But
You know what I mean?
Karashad would be Karashad.
I remember when we made a siyum on Masechet Imamos in the Daf Yomi, it was the happiest day of my life. Not because I had completed Imamos, but because I'm finished with you. In any event, the bottom line is that Reb Chaim has this breakthrough revolution in which he distinguishes between das, which is required when you have bailus over the chalos. You create the chalos. It's a product of your creation. It's maisi yadav. As opposed to kavana, where all you need is to have intention for the maisi. And now we're saying that Afkamina is going to be cherishot for cotton, because even though they're lav das, but they could have kavana. Again, there'll be various conditions. They can only have kavanah when they reach a certain level of understanding. They can only have kavanah if it's gadol omer al gaba. Every din is going to be different.
The distinction between das and kavana, you're equating to edus with regard to the kayem adavar or the bir adavar.
Right.
It's just an extrapolation of the same concept.
It's haba talia, meaning if you need das and you're creating the chalos, then you have to bring two edim into the picture to create the chalos. If on the other hand, that's called edikim. If on the other hand, it's just kavana, then all you need is edim bir. And again, if we had a couple of hours, we'd go through the Reb Chaim inside and all the rights. I mean, it's very sophisticated. Let me tell you. So we're not dealing right now with the laws of edus. But I would like to quote to you, and that was the last thing that we discussed, a Rambam in Hilchas Paraduma in Perik Yud. And the Rambam writes in Hilchas Paraduma, Katan sheyesh bo das kosher lahazos. Right, this halacha that you take to make chatos, and you sprinkle it on the tameh, on the third day, the seventh day, etc., etc. But you have to have in mind that you are doing this hazah not as some sort of ceremony, but as a process of tara in order to be mitayr. So that's hazah on a tameh. And the Rambam says that even a katan, if he has das, he's a mature katan. He understands what it means to a vitara. He understands what meichatos is. He is kosher hazah. So the question is, wait a second, a katan is a labar das. So how could the Rambam say that if he has das, he's able to do hazah? He's not a bar das. The halacha defines him as a labar das. He could be the Vilna Gaon. He could be an author of many books, but he's not yet a bar das according to halacha. So the answer is that what do you need for hazah? You don't need das. All you need is kavanah.
How do we know that?
We meant kavana.
I don't know it. You have to ask how the Rambam knew it. You know, understand what I'm saying? I know it because the Rambam says a katan is kosher lazah. How can a katan be kosher lazah if he's a labar das? And the only answer that we could possibly give is that all you need is kavanah. You don't need das. You follow? We're working with a certain, shall I say, almost mathematical premises.
Right.
The premise is that a katan is labar das. The premise is that a katan is kosher for X, Y, and Z. Therefore, I have to assume that you don't need das for X, Y, and Z because a katan is a labar das. So Reb Chaim supplies us with the lumdisha terminology that all you need is kavanah. So whenever I see in all of halacha, in the whole gamut of Torah, that a katan is kosher, I have to assume that you don't require das. According to Yerushalmi, a katan is capable of making a kinyan, even without das acheres. In the case of mitzvah, it must be that to make a kinyan, you don't need das. All you need is kavanah. If the Mishnah says that a katan can write a get, lishma, then it must be that lishma doesn't require das, all it requires is kavanah. And so too, if chalitza only requires kavana, then even a katan could be theoretically capable of chalitza. Again, we have other problems and technical issues in
But
Barrett.
what's the Havana?
And then we have-
What's the Havana? What's the Havana? Why should Azaya by Paraduma or the Kriya by Chalitza be any
Because
different
again,
than other
the
scenarios of
hazah,
Shas?
what generates the Tara? What generates the Tara and the transformation of a Tome to a state of Tara is what? The Mechatas. One of the conditions is that it has to go through a hazah, correct? So it's not that the hazah is that as the mazah, I have bios. I mean, the Rav Zechron in one of his Yartzeit shiurim at the end of the shir, he was speaking about the fact that no, it was a shir on Parshas Chukas, which is the Parsha of the Paraduma. So I remember the Rav saying that the real mazah, according to the Zohar, is the Ribono Shalom. No one really could be a mazah. The mazah can't create a tara out of a tummy. So you're not the bailim over here. You're not creating something new. You're not being makadish and isha and creating chalos issues. You're not being magarish and isha and being mafkia issues. And therefore, we don't require bailus. We don't require das. And all requires kavan. But again, Rabbos, I want you to understand what's going on. I'll tell you on vacation. As Odpam, do you hear what I'm saying, Rabbos? That the halacha here is, ani bikashti.
Which time you finish?
Bod chatzi shabel. You say that? As the gayes lecha milyonim. B'ezrat Hashem. So you hear what we're saying is that whenever you see in halacha that a katan is kosher for a maisa, it means what does he put into the maisa? Not das, because it's a lot about das, but kavan. And we gave 3 examples: the Yerushalmi as far as Kinyan,
Yeah, he's gonna say that.
and the Bavli in the Mishnah as far as Ksibas get, and the Rambam as far as Hazah.
Good luck.
Correct. I'll tell you what he means by das. He means an understanding. He's not using Reb Chaim's terminology of das.
Good luck bringing.
Ari, what were you saying before? I didn't catch.
Chaim's shita that the cousin can always have to run out just in these 3 specific cases, or?
Well,
What about Chag Yisrael?
I'm not sure. I think that it might apply to Nedarim as well. That a neder doesn't need das, and it only needs kavan. And this I discussed actually a few hours ago in a neighborhood called Dagan, because what we do is once a week we get together, those who are learning Daf Yomi, and we do a shir be'iyun. And there's an amazing chiddush of Reb Naftali Trub, in which he says that for neder, all you need is kavanah for the maisa neder. And therefore, even if, let's say, he was tricked, he thought his wife had stolen something, and in fact she didn't, the neder would be chal unless he explicitly made a t'nai, and he said, well, I'm answering a neder on you if you actually stole something, and it was a libel, and she turned out that she was guiltless and she hadn't stolen, and that's why, since the t'nai was not. But if not for the t'nai, then Reb Naftali says that the neder would be chal. Even though what motivated him was what? His assumption, his suspicion that she had stolen from the little kupao. Anyway, but we're not learning the Dharm right now. Just you asked me, Ari, are there other cases in Shas where a katan could be capable of creating some new change in halacha, even though he's a labardas? The Dharm might be one of them. Okay, then there might be another one in the case of Chatzi Shivcha, Chatzi Beschorin, if he's a Bentes and he's capable of beer. Again, we'd have to go through, like, I don't know if the encyclopedia Talmud did get up to Erech Katan yet. That's Kuf. I don't think they're up to Kuf yet. But if and when they get up to Kuf, I'll have a more intelligent answer to your question. I'm a big fan of the encyclopedia Talmud.
So Chaim here was always talking about
Chalitza.
No, he's talking about Chalitza. And he's talking about Ksivas Get Lishma. Those are the 2 areas that Reb Chaim comes up.
So with Chag Yisrael, the Katan can be a shaman.
I don't know. I'm not learning Chol Yisrael now.
Okay. No, I'm saying, I'm sure, I'm
You're
also.
talking about kashrus in
Katan-
general. Is a cotton neman to be dinedech and then be surin. That I don't know
Ah.
why you're asking about. I'm not sure if I understand why you're asking about chol Yisrael. Can a katan testify that this is kosher and now I rely on a katan? Like for example, Gemara says in b'dikas chametz, he can tell you that there was a b'dika, right?
That is a pure.
Yeah, that's something else. That has to do with chazakas and umdinus. That's not relevant to us. We're talking about a katan who enters into a maisa, and as a result of the maisa, something changes. Do you follow what I'm saying?
He's doing master because he's got.
No. He's not doing a maisa. He's just telling you that the milk is kosher. That's all he's telling you. He's not doing a maisa. I'm talking about a hazah. I'm talking about a writing of a get, which has tremendous halachic ramifications. I'm talking about a kinyan. Does he acquire ownership over something? I'm not talking about the cotton telling me that this is kosher. Send it to a chemical lab, and the lab will tell you whether it's kosher. And I tell the guy, maybe a kfela, can tell you it's kosher. You know what I'm talking about? Those are based on chazakas and different things like that. Now, if you ask me the question, would Gadol Omed Al Gabav help for Kedushin and Gittin? The answer is no, because we need the cotton who's a bardas, and the das bailam is going to generate the Kedushin and Gittin, and that a cotton is not capable. But when the requirement is not das, but rather what? Kavana, then we have something to talk about. Now we can do business. Okay then? All right. Now I want to tell you over something that I heard in the name of the Rav zillions of years ago. He wanted to know, there's something, does anybody know what Mesiras Modah is all about? Have you heard of it? Let's say I'm coerced to do a kinyan. Not you, I don't mean you, but you out there, you're a big mafioso and you want me to sell you my field. So you coerce me to do a machir. That's called Tilyu V'Zav. So believe it or not, if my life is at stake, is vine. The sale is valid. Unless I was Moser Modah. Means I got together two Eidim. Again, very dangerous operation here because if the mafioso finds out about this, boom, you're not going to live too long. But anyway, somehow he was able to get to two Eidim. And he told the Eidim on now being Moser Modah that this, a transaction that I'm entering into is what? Is against my will. I'm being compelled under duress. And later on, he can bring the Eidim, or if they write a Shtar Modah, and he can produce that evidence at Besdin and completely null and void the Kinyan, the Mechir. Now let's take the opposite case. This is not the Gemara's case of Mesiras Modah. What happens if you will buy something under duress? Imagine the following case. The mafiosos have a piece of property that they have to get rid of, right? They have to pawn off. So they pick up this little yid and they decide to force him to buy this field. And now he goes ahead and buys the field, but he was Moser Modah that he's doing so under duress. What would you say? We just said, according to the Yerushalmi, that a katan is capable of acquiring ownership. Because in Kinyanim, to acquire ownership, we don't need das. All we need is what? Kavan. It could be, that's what the Rav was toying with, that Mesiras Modah is meaningful to be Mavatal das. But when the halacha doesn't require das, so if you force me to sell something, that's called das makne. So das makne, if he's Moser Modah, it means there was no das, and then the kinyan doesn't get off the ground. But with regard to das kone, we said that it could be, and that's the Yerushalmi sheet. You don't require das kone. So the question is, if you only need kavana, could Mesiras Modah undermine kavana? And the Rav actually was inclined to think, if I remember correctly, that Mesiras Modah can undermine das, but not kavana.
Why isn't it called a chomer?
Yeah,
because kavana means you had intention to do this action. There's no question about it. He had intention to buy the field. He was forced to do so. He didn't have das, but he definitely had kavana. Like the case I gave you in Nedarim, where he didn't want to impose a neder onto his wife if she didn't steal the goods, but yet it might be chal. Why? Because we're not interested in what motivates you. That's halach of das. We want to know if he had kavanah for the neder, and he had kavanah for the neder.
But isn't the Mesiras Modah, the question is how powerful is that Mesiras Modah?
Yeah, we don't know. What is
Mesiras Modah
the scope of Mesiras
If it
Modah?
can be oker, something that you requires das, so kal v'chomer, it can be oker, something that only.
No,
requires
not at all.
kavanah, no?
Ellie, listen to what you're saying. Kavana means something very low ed. I had intention for the mice. Das is a higher requirement. The conditions and what you have to check off in order to achieve das are that much greater than the case of kavana. So it could be that even though he was Moser Modah, that's as far as that greater requirement of das. And therefore the Modah is a counterforce that undermines das. But in the case of kavana, where it's a lower ebb and all I require even a Katan is capable of kavana on both sides. Could you imagine, according to the Yushalmi, a Katan could be Zochen and Mitzia. Here's a diamond ring, and the Katan picks up the diamond ring. It's his Doraisa according to the Yushalmi. What happened over here? What happened was that he had kavana. That's all he needs is kavana. So even if there was a Mesiras Modah, I'm not sure, says Rav Soloveitchik, if Mesiras Modah has the power to be Oker kavana. Because kavan is so basic, it's such a low level, low flame. And I just was very excited about that. I don't know if you see it on my face, but I get very excited.
By the way, the example that you gave about the Katan finding a diamond ring, it's says Yush, it's only from the Hefker.
Yeah, okay, I'm talking about, when I say Mitzia, what I really mean is Hefker.
No, the God wasn't there.
Yeah, the case that I got.
Okay. So again, let's just reiterate. According to the Yushalmi, you don't need das to be Kohen. However, although the Yushalmi says that a Katan is capable through his kavana, if he's a bar kavana, he's mature enough to acquire ownership, but nevertheless not in Gittin and Kiddushin. So imagine the following scenario. A Katan is Makadish and Isha. No one, and I emphasize that, no one would say that this Kiddushin is valid. And why not? Because you need das. Okay, now I'm going to challenge you. The next part of the shir, I'm telling you right up front, is for the miskadmim. You know what I'm saying? This is for those who are like in a postgraduate course in halakha. So if you don't understand,
Sounds like it's challenging.
yeah, no, I'm just saying, I
Perfect
want
time for
to
me to leave.
apologize. If you don't understand the next 5 minutes of shir,
Shouldn't feel bad.
please don't feel bad and don't throw in the towel and don't say Rabbi Berzon is confusing me. It's in in brackets. If you're a gadol b'Torah, maybe we can understand this. What is Kiddushin? Is it das makna? Or is it das kohen? Let me reformulate my question. There's a man and a woman who supplies the das makna and who supplies the das kohen. So what does that mean?
He's a Kohen.
Who's supplying the das makna and who's supplying the das kohen?
Ha'isha niknes. Ha'isha niknes is she is purchased. So the man is the one who's buying. No?
No, she's selling, but she's not selling.
No, ha'isha niknes means that she's makna herself to him and he's kona.
Yeah, he's asking.
He's buying.
He's the das kona,
He's
she's the
not
das makna.
Of course.
She's being makna herself to him.
Yeah.
And we just finished saying that according to the Yushalmi, there's a fundamental difference between das makna and das kona. In das makna, you need das, and a katan is a labar das. But in das kona, all you need is kavana, and a katan is a bar kavana. He can acquire ownership. If a man is acquiring, if you pardon the expressions, again, this is Kinyan Isser. I'm not getting into all the Reb Shimon Shkopson on this because the women get very nervous about this language. But leave out that, right? If the man is acquiring the woman and he's making a kinyan on her, she's the one who's being makna herself. And he can't do it against her will, so she certainly needs das makna. So if you would ask me, can a man marry a ketana? For sure not. Because a ketana is a labar das, and she cannot, and therefore she cannot do the das makna. She can be makna herself. But now I have a real problem. What about if she's a Gedola, but he's a Katan? So she's being Makne, and she's a Gedola, so she has Das.
He's a Kohen.
He's a Katan, and he doesn't have capability of a Das Kona. But who cares? According to Yerushalmi, I don't need Das Kona. All I need is Kavana. And the Katan is mature enough. I mean, he's the Vilna Gaon, and he understands what's going on over here. You know what I'm saying? By the way, I'm laughing because I remember when I was in elementary school, I went to a co-ed elementary school. That's a whole story. Why all my siblings went to, the real, and they sent me to a co-ed school. That's a whole story in itself. It's fine. Whatever. Anyway, so during my 9 years, right? Because there were 8 grades plus kindergarten, whatever it was, during that 9 years, the Yeshiva Rambam, which I graduated in, I don't want to tell you when, I mean, way before you guys were born, but I never went back to the yeshiva. Okay, I don't get emotional about that stuff. So I remember in 4th grade, somebody gave Kiddushin to a girl up on the roof in front of the entire class.
Nice.
And we had to go to a Rav to decide whether or not she needs a get, which would be horrible because...
Can't marry a Kohen.
What?
Then she wouldn't be able to marry a Kohen afterwards.
That's right. She would be. This is a terrible situation. So as it turned out, the Rav Paskin, I don't remember who the rabbi was at that time. He's probably long gone, but he Paskin that it's not. They didn't mean it seriously. Blah 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 blah. But now let's take the case of a Katan who gives Kiddushin to a Gedola. Is it feasible? Again, if I said this in Rav Soloveitch's class, he would throw me out of my head. Is it feasible that this could create Ishus Doraisa? Why? Because the Baal, the Chasan, requires Das Kona. He's being Kona. Right? The reflexive of Kona is nickname. So she's nicknames. But she's the one who's being Makna herself. She's the Das Makna.
I think it's different. I don't know if that's I can say exactly why, but I think that when the man's role in Kiddushin, whether it's through Kesef Star or the things that the ways of doing via all the things that the man has to do are actions that aren't just. It's not. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that Kiddushin is not just a Kenyan. There are situations where it's just a Kenyan.
You mean it goes beyond Kenyan?
I think it's more than a Kenyan. There may be also a Kenyan of the woman being makna herself to the man. But I think there's more here. He has to do these things. She can't just say, "Okay, I'm selling myself. Who's buying me?" And
I'm being makna myself.
I'm being makna myself.
You can use bia in order to make the purchase.
In other words, whether it's bia, whether it's shtar, all these other ways of doing it are actions that are. Like you said, you term used for kiyum, like you have 80 kiyum. There's a kiyum here. There's something that's happening here more than just the Kenyan, I think. Right. And therefore, I think that for that other thing,
that
whatever it is
Kenyan plus, and that balance that
plus needs das, and not
what's
just
the word I'm looking for? That
sefer,
increment,
from
that goes beyond just simple kavana. And regular kinyanim, that generates a din that he is now the das makna.
Das makna, but it requires das for doing it. And maybe it's not even.
I'm just saying,
maybe not in the Torah of kinyanim.
Right.
But between Kiddushin and Chalitza. In Chalitza, there's no chalos. In chalos, no me'elim.
Right.
But the Kiddushin is a chalos,
right.
So then the chalos maybe kavana the das kind is not enough. In other words, with a sale, there doesn't be a chalos. It's just you buy it. With Kiddushin is a chalos, so maybe the das.
But again, in the case of if a Katan makes a kinyan on a mitzvah,
right,
which according to Shalmi is a kinyan doraisa,
right,
he's definitely making halos. Do you follow what I'm saying? If somebody takes it from him, he's going to violate Zela, and theoretically he should get 40 lashes. There's no question that Kinyanim is the paradigm of Chalos.
Right.
And this Chalos is generated, says the Yerushalmi, through Kavana, because the Katan is capable at a certain age of Kavana. So I'm just saying, if his Kavana is enough to establish and effectuate a Kinyan, according to the Yerushalmi.
Right.
Why? Because he has das Kona.
Only needs kavana.
and all he needs for das kona is kavana, then I would have said that in the case of marriage, from the Baal's perspective, he is the kona, and if he's the kona, all he needs is kavana according to Shalom. Again, unless we want to, I'll tell you, no matter what answer you'll say to this question, I don't think it's satisfying.
I don't know.
I just thought that maybe, what's the phrase in English to, when you have a bitter pill to make it a little bit easier to swallow, what's the word?
That's where it's.
No.
There's a word in English, to at least take the sharpness, the edge off this kasha, because this kasha, like you can lose your sleep over this kasha. Let me ask you the following question. A star kiddushin, like a star gerushin, requires what? Lishma, correct? The star has to be written lishma.
Writing the star.
Correct. The writing of the star has to be lishma. Now, let me take a step back. In Hilchos Shtaros, there's one key concept that holds the basis for creating a star. What condition in every single star has to be met in order to create a star? For example, if let's say I witness together with someone else, we witness together that you borrowed money from him, could we write a star? Absolutely not. That's called mipiyam v'lo mipichsava. So what is the key for every star? And this is Tosfos all over the place.
Well, whatever.
It's called das hamischayim. What does that mean? The lover is the mischayev, and he has to commission the writing of the star. If the malva says to two Eidim, write me a star that Ploni Almoni is borrowing 1,000 from me, that's not a star. That's Eidus Mipiksoma. That's possible. So there's a new halach in star, that a star has to be written midas hamischayim. Now, in the case of a get, the Baal, is giving up a kinyan. He had a kinyan on his wife, and now he's breaking that up. He's forfeiting that kinyan. By nullifying the kinyan, he becomes the das hamischayim. So I understand full well that he has to write the get. What do I mean write the get? I don't mean physically write the get. He has to commission the writing of the get. Otherwise, it's not lishma, because the Baal in Gerushin is the mischayev. On the contrary, she's being zochin herself. She's becoming a free agent. Who has to write a star kiddushin? Again, when I say write, I mean commission. The Baal does. And the Gemara derives this from the pasuk Yika. What the Gemara is telling me is that to marry a woman is a das hamischayim. That's a pella, because in Mechira, for example, a star mecher has to be written by the mocher, not by the lokeach. The lokeach is being zochen a brand new piece of real estate here in Israel, right? And real estate is going up. So who's the mischayev?
The analogy with the case of the marriage is that she would be the one who has to write it, but that's not
correct. Logically, if not for the pasuk Yikach, which Gemara uses to derive that he has to write the star kiddushin, the logical conclusion should have been, if we're consistent with everything that we've been saying, especially as far as get, that in the get she doesn't commission it because she's being zochin herself, right? She's being konas atzma, as it says at the beginning of Masechet Sanhedrin. But he has to write the get because he's giving up on his kinyan. He's the mischayev. Just like the mocher is giving up on his field, he has to write the get, and the star, and if he doesn't commission the writing of the star mecher, the star is not worth a dime. So if we want to be absolutely consistent, then in the case of a star kiddushin, again, if not for the pasuk Yikach, we would have said that on the contrary, she has to write the star kiddushin. I'm sure the feminists would be very happy about that. But it's not just feminism, it's logic. It's halachic logic, it's valid logic. She's the one who's being makna herself. And if she's being makna herself, she's being mischayev. She's giving up on her own kinyan on herself. And yet the Gemara says he has to write, he commissioned the writing of the star. In other words, he is called the mischayev. It's as if to say that in a certain sense, he's committing himself to whatever it is. Let's call it Sherksus Viona. Again, don't catch me on my words, but I'm saying there's a certain level of commitment. And for that, you need das. It's not enough to have kavana, because he now becomes the das hamischayim. which is similar to the case of the makna. Do you follow what I mean? He's being makna himself. What does it mean to be makna? It means I'm giving up on something. He's, in a certain sense, I know this sounds very strange, but he's giving up on his own freedom. He's committing himself to marriage. He's the mischayev. He has to write the shtar. And therefore he has to have das for Kiddush. Kavan is not enough.
So that's the answer. That's the answer before as to why we said that in the case of marriage, why a Katan wouldn't be allowed to do
Wouldn't be able to effectuate a marriage because he is the das HaMeschayev, he is like the mocher, and you need das for that. And if you need das, the Katan is a lot bar das. Kavana would not be sufficient.
Because the Kavana is only sufficient only when he's a Kohen, not when he's a Makim.
Right. Now, I just want to finish up our discussion tonight with the following question. Tosas says that the Gemara Bav Mitzia establishes that a Katan cannot be Kona through Chatzer, because Chatzer is mitam Shlichus, and a Katan doesn't have Shlichus. That's what we read before inside in the Tosas. I'm going to play the devil's advocate, and I'm going to tell you that even if Chatzah is mitam shlichus, the Chatzah should be kona on behalf of the Katan. How do I arrive at such a bizarre conclusion? We say that there's a halacha that a Katan doesn't have shlichus. Yesh lachkar. Let's offer two definitions, two alternatives. Number one, a Katan can't appoint a shliach. Minu shlichus is a creation of a chalos and it requires a bar das. A Katan doesn't have das to appoint a shliach. Or number two, a Katan is mufka legamri from shlichus. A Katan not only cannot create a shliach, but in the second definition, he cannot have a shliach. My nafkamina. In a case where you don't need minun, if let's say shlichus would operate and be valid without minui, without appointing the shliach, then it depends, in the case of a Katan, on these two definitions. If the problem of a Katan is that he's not capable of a minui, but he can have a shliach, we don't need his minui. If, on the other hand, he is mufka in ganzen completely from shlichus, then even if there was a minui without the Katan, the shlichus would not be operative. What would be the case of a shlichus without minui, Rabosa? Zachin li'adam shalom b'fan. Why? Because who appointed you to be zocha for me? You're a good guy. You know, you're, what do they call it? You get brownie points, right? You're
Good Samaritan.
a good Samaritan. Excellent. You're a good Samaritan. So you want to be zocha on my behalf. So you're a self-appointed shliach. Can you do so on behalf of Katan? Tosafos says no. Apparently, what did Tosafos understand about Katan and shlichus? He's mufka. It's not just an issue of technically he can't do a minun. Is Memela Tosafos says a Chatzer could not be Kona on behalf of Katan. Why not? Because Chatzer is mitam shlichus. We don't need minun. I don't have to point to Chatzer and say, Hineni memanes a Chatzer lios shlichi. A Chatzer is an upstanding, is a stand-up shliach. So we completely circumvent the minui. So why can't the Chatzer be Kona on behalf of the Katan? Apparently, Tosafos derives the conclusion that a Katan is not only a problem of what? Of minui shliach, but a Katan is completely excluded from shlichus. But I want to conclude this year with a Rambam. And now you'll see why I wanted to argue against this Tosafos. The Rambam paskins in Perek Beis Mehilchas Gerushin Halacha Tesvav that if a pikeach appoints a shliach for a get, but before the shliach delivered the get, the pikeach became a shota.
Right.
The Rambam says the get is possible. Now you have to go back to the beginning of Hilchas Gerushin. The Rambam tells us that whenever I write in Hilchas Gerushin Eino get, it means the get is not chal d'oraisa. Whenever I write in Hilchas Gerushin pasul, it means the get is kosher d'oraisa and pasul midrabanan. The Rambam says explicitly in Perek Beis Hilchas Gerushin, in this case, where the pikeach appointed a shliach, and now he became a shota, the Rambam says that the get is pasul. What does that mean, pasul? Pasul d'Rabbanan and kosher d'oraisa. How could that be? What do you see from this Rambam Rabosai?
Giving it over to the.
Who deserves a free pizza? I'm not committing myself, but anyway, because I don't live here in Alot Shpur, so for me to schlep it a pizza. What do you say, Eli?
To be mona a shliach, the Rambam is saying in this case, midoraisa, he was mona shliach, and
When he was what?
when he gave the get over to the shliach when he was a pikeach.
He was a pikeach.
That was the mesira of the get as far as the Rambam.
Well, no, you're going a little too far. You get a half a slice.
I think,
No, what? Yeah, what do you say?
no,
What
saying-
happens? What happened since he was a pikeach when he gave the get over to the shliach? Exactly, he achieved the mini shlichus. And the Rambam says if he achieved the mini shlichus, now he can have shlichus even though what? He's a shota. And the Torah goes ballistic on this Rambam. And he says, no, the get is pasul d'oraisa. Because a shota cannot have shlichus. He's a labar das. He's completely mufka for shlichus.
Whereas the Rambam says once he did minui, so by doing minui, so that was his way of the shliach saying, okay, I'm imona now, right? And whatever happens to him afterwards.
He was reminded the shliach. Okay, a cheresh shot for Katan could not be, they're not capable of minui, but he was a pikeach at the time of the meeting.
And the shot is not mufta.
And a shot is not mufka. If he was mufka, then how could the get be kosher d'oraisa when he became a shota before the get was delivered?
So that goes to the other side of the chakira that you asked. That you mentioned.
Correct. That would be that a Katan's problem in shlichus is only a problem in minui. So now I have a major problem according to the Rambam. Why can't a chatzah be kon on behalf of Katan? The Gemara says explicitly that since chatzah is mitam shlichus, a chatzah cannot be kona. I don't need minui in the case of a chatzah.
Is that a Gemara? That's also.
That's the Gemara. The Gemara is black on white. Ad kan. I don't know. We have a lot to think about.
I almost track, this goes back to Ben Sora and Mora.
No, in Ben Sora and Mora, there's a whole sugya about whether Katan could father a child, and that has to do with who's kosher for Ben Sora and Mora. So in that context, the Gemara says that if a Katan could father a child, then he could be Morish, he could have a Yorish. But if he can't, then there's no Yerusha. So Tosfos points out that the implication is that the Katan owns possessions. Otherwise, you don't have to rack your brains and figure out whether it's Yorish or not Yorish.
So let's think the way to wait about.
Okay. Ellie, I just had one question for you if you have a split second.